Shadiversity.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and you know, we've recently been sent this samurai armor from Romance of Men, and this sword, by the way, to give a review. But that raises an opportunity, Nate. Because you see, people might think... Pointy?
That's very pointy.
Yeah, I wonder if you could use them. The thing is, though, it raises an interesting question because you might not think that samurai armor kind of fits our preferences, you could say. We have a distinct, you could almost bias towards a certain period and culture.
Yeah, I do have a preference towards like medieval, Renaissance Europe. That's just, that's what I like.
But comparing the you know, interesting elements of weapons and armor from one culture to another is really fun. We've done that a lot with the katana, but we haven't really done this with samurai armor for what big reason? We haven't had samurai armor.
But now we do.
Now we do. The question that is raised then, with us being such significant, like, lovers of the medieval period and stuff, do you think a knight, and we could almost substitute our own preferences, you know, I've done a lot of research into knightly code and history, weapons and armor, would a knight want to wear and use samurai armor if it was available?
That's a very good question. I think we should explore that.
I think we need to explore that. That's what we're going to be doing here with a general review of this armor provided by Romance of Men. I'm holding back.
Japanese translation of that, I'm sure, sounds absolutely amazing. But I'm taking it...
I'm holding back. I'm
taking it as the classic meaning of the word romance.
Yeah,
which is like deep and emotional.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
in actual fact, that term is used, you know, in knightly kind of history and
I can talk about a painting being romantic without necessarily being talking about lovers. So I could romanticize about, that's going to be taken out of context, I could romanticize about armor.
So yeah, they sent us this with this katana as well. And
it's all very red.
Like, one of the things I think a knight would really appreciate about samurai armor is the color.
It's very vibrant, yes, because I am not as colourful as what a knight would be. Knights are usually very bright. I mean, the brightest thing I've got here is the heater shield.
Good point. Like, you're kind of representing more man-at-arms,
even men-at-arms,
soldier.
Rather...
You're right, actually. But yeah, knightly people, but also medieval people generally love colour.
Oh, yes.
And so they might be wearing a jupon or a tabard over top. And so there was a lot of options that medieval people really liked to explore when it comes to blinging out their kits.
Oh yeah, and they had drip. They had drip.
Massive drip. What's really good about, you know, this armor here, Romance of Men, they allow you to customize everything. The color, the types of cords. So you got those options, and this is a very custom kind of, when they say, offered us, like, all right, we'll take you up on that. And they said, what do you want? Here are all the options. And
Shadiversity red the whole way.
That's right. Or you can just, you know, you can just call it Shad Red.
Shad red?
Shad red.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we can call it
Because I was clearly the first person in all history who wore that color.
Moving on.
It's just objective.
But I think what we should do is discuss from, I suppose, our experience of wearing armor, studying armor, talking about how good this would actually be in combat. Because we've got some similarities, like we've got similarities with the arms, with the pauldrons, with the legs, not necessarily the way that it's all put on. Now I'm wearing one particular piece of armor, one very specific piece, whereas we could compare it to brig, to chain, to scale, to lamellar. So I think we should start, but the question is,
I think
where?
Exactly. There are some caveats to mention in regards to this specific one I'm wearing here. So it is metal, okay, but it's very thin. This is not battle grade armor. And so in the comparison, I can't really compare fairly weight. The breastplate you're wearing here actually is a battle grade breastplate.
A light battle grade, but it is still a battle grade.
Put it through heaps of abuse. Like look at that.
But this isn't necessarily what a high grade knight would wear. This is more your standard infantryman.
Kind of munitions grade. That is like 1.5 to 2 mil thick, mild steel. This is about 0.5 mil thick in a lot of places. So,
and is it mild? Do we recall?
I think it's only mild. But interestingly enough, a lot of Japanese armor, metal grade, was mild low carbon steel. Most of it was low carbon, even just iron in a lot of sense. Now that is a thing to bring into consideration. Steel quality, okay? Because if a knight was, you know, going about, and he had options, and he could choose classic, traditional, medieval kind of armor, and then he had a full Japanese samurai.
That looks amazing, but is made of a lower quality steel.
That is an interesting question to bring up. The thing is, though, not all medieval armor was high quality steel.
No, absolutely.
In actual fact, one of the more contemporary bits of armor you can compare to, not the whole thing, but parts of this armor is brigandine. Now, one of the things that really makes me think of brigandine are like these pieces here, where they're metal plates held together with cord, where brigandine are metal plates held together with rivets on cloth. And so it gives you a level of flexibility, like especially this. This is very reminiscent of brigandine. Right
I would also, like, it doesn't, oh no, it does flex.
It does flex.
I'd almost call that lamellar as well.
Yeah, this is basically lamellar.
It is. There's a lot of similarity. So would a knight choose the lower quality steel? I don't think so. Well, I don't think so. I don't think anyone given the choice would choose a lower quality, especially if price wasn't it. And a lot of knights, they went poor.
Here is the thing though.
Trying to afford
most historical brigandines that we reference, or at least a very good portion of them, are really low carbon steel.
Very low carbon steel.
So I'm referencing Todd's workshop when he is testing brigandine, and he is saying, when we look at the ones from museums, a lot of it is low carbon, like not a high quality. And I think we kind of got to experience a bit of reason why when we tested this thing right here. Because this blocked nearly everything.
It did.
Very few things got through. And it is hard to make high carbon steel, and especially if you want to quench and temper it and stuff. It puts in a lot of, like, I guess, processes of effort that you need to go. They did make it, don't get me wrong. Like, there were cases of medieval armor that had hardened steel, and that's phenomenal stuff. A lot of effort, a lot of skill, technique required to make it. So one of the ways to compensate is you could cheaper, more available, low carbon steel, just make it a little bit thicker.
Yes,
and it kind of balances out.
It does also make it a little bit heavier.
It depends, because like, if it's 20% heavier to like, you're not going to
5 to 10%, or that could. I think for a battle that's going to count.
You reckon?
Yeah, I really do. I really do. But if we're talking just generally that, you know, there was a lower chance of quality coming from Eastern armor than Western armor, which is speculation. I don't actually know too much about that armor. I would still say that you go for the higher quality armor. Usually people go with what they know and what they trust. It would have to really stand out for a knight to go to something that they wouldn't normally be familiar with.
I think there is an argument to have that actually is a bit of a counter to that, and that is the uniqueness of it, the exoticness. Like, knights wanted to stand out and have bling.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, because this is bling and it's very distinctive, that would make it stand out, it would be almost a sign of prestige. Now, interestingly, we have examples, specifically Europe and Asia, or Japan, actually doing what we're talking about. Not necessarily, well, actually, in one case it is armor. I've never come across an instance of a European warrior, where it's a knight, soldier, whatever, like having available Japanese armor and choosing Japanese armor.
No.
But I have come across the reverse, where Japanese samurai picked certain parts of European armor and integrated into their Japanese. So there is surviving examples of Japanese armor that has a European breastplate.
Okay. Now we do have to preface this with the fact that the two periods of history we're talking about, Japanese Imperial Japan and medieval Europe, time-wise, chronologically, they didn't quite overlap. There was a moderate few hundred years gap between the two. So when we're talking medieval armor, it's almost later Renaissance period pieces. More like this breastplate than it would be a knight's breastplate or brigandine usually.
So yeah, the armor piece that I've seen integrated with Japanese armor was clearly like 16th century at least. It was Renaissance, because it's funny, gunpowder weapons were being integrated more in Europe, but Japan was still using them, and the samurai class was still operating and going in warfare with, you know, same with guns. But the kind of later period of, you know, European history, well, when I say European history, I'm talking about medieval. Like, we're talking about, it's the Renaissance period where Japan started to really adopt and bring in some of these European pieces. And so, yeah, we do see European breastplate integrated with samurai armor. And in reverse, there are some instances, we're talking about, it might even be after the Renaissance in this, but Europeans grabbing katanas.
Yes, now that's always almost been a big thing. That katana has always been a nice trophy piece that was very, very sought after. It does.
It's gorgeous. And because of the way it's made, they end up with a very functional blade.
They do.
Katana, when it's made well, not all katanas, they think all katanas are like, because they're made this way, they're great. No, even with the differential hardening, the folding, everything, you can still get very low quality.
You absolutely can.
You know, katanas. But when they're made right, and they end up with good steel, yeah, they have a hard, good sharp edge.
So let's take your European medieval knight, not necessarily the Renaissance, not necessarily early industrial era, like proper medieval knight, and somehow time travel to look at Imperial Japan. I think there's elements of this that they would love. Later in armor, they ended up building them in multiple pieces. So when you moved, because gambesons are one good example of this. Gambesons usually are one big tube with 2 tubes for your arms. When you wear a belt and you go to move up high, like for a St. George block or something like that, you can't move your arm because your belt is caught. They started to separate those pieces. And we noticed today when you were putting this on, this arm is completely separate to this arm, which is completely separate to the leg pieces, which is completely separate to the chest. So if that was tailored perfectly, you would have really good flexibility. You wouldn't be caught like I am a little.
Aha! There's another point that we need to discuss though, comparing Japanese armor to European, and that is how easy is it to put on? That's an important point to consider. This is one of the right reasons why Brigandine was is speculated to be more popular amongst, you know, more average soldiers who might not have a squire to help them get in armor. Brigandine opening at the front means they could put it on themselves much easier. Well, I tried to put this on, and there are some interesting parallels, let's just say, in putting on this armor versus medieval armor. If you want to see me attempt it, that is special bonus content for our supporters who are supporting us here on channel memberships or Patreon or Player or Subscribe Star. So if you want to see dedicated, actual content made for our supporters, become a supporter and you get access to it all. Not only this, a whole heap of content that is there. Thank you for supporting us, and there's a bit more to discuss about would a knight wear armor. Let's go. Let's keep going. This is where we start to actually look at some of the comparisons between this Japanese armor and medieval armor. Caveat, right? This piece or set that I'm wearing is not going to be 100% representative of all Japanese types of armor. This is only representative of this specific one by this specific manufacturer. And so if we run into certain issues with this, there's a chance that criticism or even compliment might not actually apply to Japanese armor generally. Weight is one of the issues. This is going to be half the weight of what actual samurai armor would be because the metal is just so thin. And you know, I've worn full steel Brigandine with steel pauldrons and stuff. This does feel lighter. It hangs off of different areas. The Brigandine hugs my entire chest.
Yes.
And so it's actually more comfortable than this, even though it's heavier.
Well, there's a lot of weight being taken by your stomach and by your lower back and your hips. That kind of is very tubular in shape.
So it is resting a bit on the hips, right? And on the shoulders more than my Brigandine, but I've also experienced when medieval armor isn't properly like tailored, you get the same thing. So it's hard to say that, you know, I don't think that is really a broad criticism for Japanese armor generally. I think that if this was fitted just a little bit better, and we had to kind of ballpark because we wanted this to be also to be able to fit Tyrant and me, and so we knowingly...
Not perfectly tailored.
Yeah.
That's understandable.
And so that's, I think, not really a point to say. One of the things I think we can objectively start to look at, the way it's connected and put together, because something that I've noticed from Japanese armor, from studying in images and references, other people who own armor and stuff and pointing out and now wearing it, there are a lot more gaps on this type of armor than a lot of medieval types of armor, depending on what type.
Well, you've just got pure silk there, which admittedly silk is a very good armor versus arrows, but not necessarily versus big cuts and big slashes.
There's mail integration in it, right? And it's very flexible.
It is.
There's a couple of things that I've already noticed. So when I take a sword out, right? Okay, I can't raise my arms any higher than this. And so I'm actually hitting the side. Is that a tailoring thing, or is it more something that happens with this style of armor?
I would assume that's a tailoring thing. And the reason being is because those are specific styles that you are meant to use with a katana. therefore you wouldn't get restricted in the armor. Samurai wouldn't, I imagine.
Yeah.
Samurai wouldn't like that.
Full plate armor, you have that same restriction, by the way, especially when you're wearing pauldrons, but not when you're wearing like mail and breastplate. Breastplate usually, look how far it comes in on the sides here, where I've got kind of this jabbing there.
Yeah.
Something that I do find interesting, the breastplate ends here, and then this is all open.
Yes, you have a
right here.
Though I'm not too sure, it wasn't meant to be that solid, because I know, for example, when you got to the higher end of medieval, you started to have sliding rivets in a lot of things like pauldrons and a lot of the German Gothic pieces. So that articulation actually started to allow for a lot more movement. I think knights would be about 50-50 on the gloves, because yes, your fingers are exposed, but at the same time, there was a lot of different periods throughout medieval history where gloves weren't necessarily used, gauntlets weren't necessarily used, and we did find a lot of examples of gauntlets, but I don't know, I reckon they would be split on those.
Yeah, this type of armor, oddly enough, maybe not odd, okay, I think if a knight was looking at it, if he had options of medieval armor, I don't necessarily think he would pick the Japanese samurai armor over medieval armor. In terms of articulation, a level of coverage. If he had only options to lower grade armor, like lower grade perhaps brigandine, or only a chainmail hauberk, yeah. Interestingly enough, it's not the knight that I think would pick samurai armor over medieval armor as a more regular standard. The type of soldier that I think would actually quite like samurai armor were archers.
That makes sense,
That
but
does
samurai
make sense.
were actually
Samurai
also,
were archers.
They were.
Because there's a couple of distinctive elements about this armor that is just suits archery, and I think it's safe to say actually was made for archery.
Like a armor angling on the prominent chest, that's very flat. So
freedom of the shoulders. I've tried to shoot in medieval armor, brigandine, and there's wearing medieval pauldrons with my armor while shooting bow is uncomfortable, it gets in the way, it restricts the movement. The way these pauldrons are attached, like
very flexible.
In terms of this movement here, the sideways movement like that.
Yeah, you're very open.
Well, it's open, but it allows that movement. It is.
So that's what I mean. It's using the phrase wrong, but you can breathe here. You're not restricted, and you don't have a like. I feel like I'm actually pushing this armor angling into place of where the string would be, whereas you're moving everything seemingly out of the way there.
You can do archery with like a medieval breastplate or a brigandine cuirass, right? But the issue is the pauldron integration. When you're doing archery with medieval style. With these pauldrons, they're cord attached, they got complete movement. Okay. They're not as protective. I think you can see how, like look at, they're even sliding off. Maybe that's kind of the way it's attached, right?
Possibly.
Maybe if we hooked it on like that. But the fact they have that freedom of movement means doing archery would be a lot easier.
I actually would like to bring up the helmets, which it's not as sharp as I portrayed it to be at the start of the video, but there's been a big talk about Vikings and horn helmets. Vikings never wore horn helmets, but we do have an example of a knight who used to wear one of these as part of the mantle, which was really a big jousting thing. It was part of a big show, but the samurai apparently wore this in battle. I completely disagree with that. I don't like it. For one major reason, which I don't, we're all carrying sharp swords at the moment, so I won't actually show on Shad, but if you're wearing that and you get hit on the head, all of a sudden, it's forcing your head down in one particular direction.
Let me put it on and we'll demonstrate. Now, we do need to mention, the horns that we picked here, we kind of thought they looked cool. Romance of Men gives you the option for heaps of customization, and you don't need to go with these types of horns.
Because that is excessive.
This is excessive. I can see why, well, like as you were mentioning, this wasn't a common thing historically, even though there are some cases of Japanese armor having horns like this. The extra weight this adds, just like this is uncomfortable. This is like pulling me off. Like, I do not like this way.
One of the things I love about medieval armor is the armor angling. They continuously put armor angling. You get hit on the head, it's going to deflect off. Even if the horns are that big, it's still a place for that to get caught, like a crossguard.
Yes.
Pull your head off to the side. I seem to have like the tune of the X-Men going through my head.
I don't know.
For some reason. I don't know why. Yeah.
If I was to try and ignore the horns on this helmet, all right, it is a completely functional helmet. Apart from some of these, I'm not a fan of the
extra decoration.
But in terms of bling, it depends what, because medieval helmets did have really
massive amounts of bling. Well,
really excessive attachments, but that's mainly for tournaments.
Mainly. But it was excessive.
Yeah, they could get excessive, and I think even this would be excessive for these horns are huge. This is a very horny helmet, Nate.
It is. It's quadruply horny.
Massively. But in terms of the fit, it's good. It's good. It's good.
So this part I don't like, but there's one particular reason that I don't like with this faceplate.
Yeah.
Which is that little point there. On medieval helmets, you don't have extra attachments like this.
I mean, this is equivalent to a gorget.
Yes, but one of those like German gorgets or French gorgets, they come out.
They do.
Here.
They come out quite a bit.
Plenty of room to breathe, and the helmet can tuck in underneath.
So when I say equivalent, I mean the comparison to compare this against would be the gorget. But you're right, it's not equivalent in the sense that this is meant to hug the face.
And there are examples of helmets that
I like that.
There are examples. Oh, I don't like that. There are examples of helmets that are very close to the face, but that little stab there
is poking me in the face already.
And now, I hope you trust me, Shad, but I feel like somebody in combat uppercutting towards that area. That's one of your eyes gone.
Something I need to compliment Japanese helmet and armor in this regard, and I think this is comparable to, even though this is thinner metal, field of view in this helmet, in this setup, is pretty darn good.
Yep.
Like, especially for the peripheral vision. Like, I can see my hand. A lot of medieval helmets, they really cut off peripheral vision.
And a lot of medieval helmets will usually have a nasal, which means you have to get used to fighting with that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, samurai would eventually get used to fighting in their armor, but...
And I'm not saying all medieval helmets. We know that there are open face bassinets and things like that.
There are indeed.
But when it comes to like having face covering and stuff, a lot of medieval helmets do cut off that peripheral vision, a chunk. Not completely, but yeah. But in terms of that, all right, so would a knight pick this type of helmet over a medieval? It depends.
Possibly. For a tournament, they very well might.
I reckon for a tournament, this thing would like rock. I reckon knights would love this thing for a tournament.
They absolutely
I mean, like, look at how it looks there. This has got bling, and that's one of the big reasons why I think knights would possibly choose samurai armor, is not necessarily the function of it, but
swag.
For the swag and the fact that this would be very distinctive and set them apart from other knights, just to get that look.
I could see that. Though, function-wise, I would prefer traditional jack chains. To those, I think I would prefer a traditional breastplate.
They're more jack chains are more robust. This is tiny mail, and though it might stop a cut, that blunt force is really going to hit your bone.
Yep.
And that's going to hurt.
I'm going to go with standard jack chains. Maybe I'm biased, I prefer Western armor, but aesthetically, it is gorgeous. Functionally, I'm still going to go with Western armor.
Yeah, there's a lot of like depends. For instance, picking this helmet, over medieval, depends on what medieval helmet they have available. I think there are a lot of medieval helmets, visored, that give, if you want full face protection, you have options for more face protection. Visibility is a thing. But I mean, this is a barboot, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
T-barboot.
It's a stylized barboot.
Yes, this isn't a historical piece. It's also LARP grade.
Yeah, it's about as thin as this armor, honestly. This is about the same kind of, yeah, we call that, just performance, LARP, whatever. That does give you a decent amount of vision. So,
it does, and it cuts off a little bit, so you lose a little bit of vision very close to down near your feet, but that's kind of about it. Oh, well, a little bit sort of here-ish, but that's kind of about it. You can breathe fairly well out of this, you can see fairly well out of this. This is a later evolution of the helmet, though, just like that. That is a later evolution of what I imagine the helmet, because that is Imperial Japan.
One thing that I find a little odd with this, right? This is made to flare out to try and deflect strikes. But if they're doing that, I would think that these, are they called lames?
We could call them lames. Western word.
The top ones would overlap the bottom ones.
You would think so.
Because if a coming down strike, it could actually get kind of caught and you could damage it and cut a cord.
But it would pinch on the back of your neck the other way.
If it gets caught here, it's going to, potentially knock down your neck. A lot of European armor, I mean, though there's cases
Aventails were a thing. Aventails were a thing. That is just chain padding on the back of the head.
Usually the top plates would overlap the bottom plates to get it to slide off. I know this one doesn't, but
Yes.
in this case, yeah.
But there are examples of lamellar pointing upwards as well.
Yeah.
So it really does depend. But with armor like that, if I had my opponent's sword get caught in my helmet, I'd be happy. As long as it's not caught in my head at the same time.
But not on the horns. You wouldn't want it caught on the horns.
No, otherwise you're walking around, you're like, I won the fight, but you're permanently sideways.
So that's kind of the main takeaway and thoughts we have about would a knight wear samurai armor if available. There's a lot of depends, and I really think the more significant takeaway is that archers would pick this type of armor more often if it was available.
Absolutely, and I think one of the more significant takeaways from the whole thing is that it's stunning to look at. It really is. Like, if I know people who have collector pieces for armor, if you happen to be in the market for a collector piece of armor, whoo, this is one. This is definitely one.
It's pretty cool. Now, again, it's not battle grade, but in terms of look, I think it's done a pretty good job. I do like the way it looks. Romance of Men provided this armor. They also provided, this is one of their katanas as well. Oh. And it's a decently affordable katana. Nice double fuller. We might need to quickly just give a couple of cuts, because that's one of the things we need to do, right?
Okay.
I'm in the samurai armor. I want to see what it's like.
You know what? Fair enough.
To cut with a katana in samurai armor. It came very sharp. This is living up to its name. On their website, this is the Katana Extra Sharp Spring Steel. That's its name. Nothing special, just telling you what it is. And yeah, this is actually one of the sharper katanas that have been sent to us. This is this is a very sharp sword. Specifically, it's called the Suradoi Handmade Extra Sharp Spring Steel Katana. And being on special, it's available for 145 bucks. So far, this is just a very functional, effective sword. For that price, it's so far one of the better priced functional katanas we've ever been sent. Is there a catch? Like, the fit and finish is nice on this. Like, for that price, that's a flippin' bargain. So if you're interested in this samurai armor, or even this very affordable, decent sword, go to Romance of Men. Links in the description for both the sword and the armor. And thank you for watching. Hope to see you again. Or you can watch one of this video right here, where we talk about katanas. Or helmets. There's a helmet video right there.